Hey guys, in tonight's FAQ, we're going to cover off on three topics: unemployment, the payroll protection program, and then the economic injury disaster loans, which is based on the questions that have come in throughout the day. We're also going to have a webinar on these two topics tomorrow at 2, and there is a registration link that'll be posted with this video to cover off on these in more detail. So I'm going to keep these at a pretty high level with some specifics for things you might want to be thinking about prior to the webinar tomorrow. So for unemployment, the first question is, when do the expanded benefits kick in? So the $600 that's getting kicked in, that's going to be in April. That expires July 31st, I believe. So basically, it's an additional 8 weeks, which would start June 1st through July 31st. Then there's also expansion of the length of time you can be on unemployment, but it's going to be at whatever the state level is at the time. So it's not going to be at the full amount. So there's been a lot of concerns about, hey, well, my employees just quit and stay at home for 39 weeks or whatever the expansion of unemployment benefits could take you up to. The answer is no, because the increased amount is going to roll off. So in North Carolina, for example, if you had somebody that chose to do that, I think the max benefit is around $350 per week, or $1,200, $1,400 some change per month. And it's highly unlikely anybody's going to stay at home for that. There's a potential that someone could stay home in this 8-week time period that otherwise didn't have to, but beyond that, pretty likely they're going to need to come back to work. So your real risk period here is really, this time frame right here of when it expires. Also had some questions about taxability. Sorry, I can't spell tonight. It's been a long day. The answer is, that's I haven't read anything to the contrary, but typically unemployment benefits are taxable. So if I see something to the contrary, I would change that. So for now, I'd assume that it's taxable. In terms of the payroll protection program, lots of questions around that, which we will address tomorrow. But probably the big thing to focus on right now that I want to address is, what is payroll? Because that's been a little bit confusing. So payroll is the net check. So if I make $100, 30 are taxes, it's 70 that's eligible. So what's also added into that is health insurance, employer portion, and employee portion. Now I can't double dip here. It's more around, if this $70 was my net check, but actually only 65 hit my account because 5 was family coverage, it's still the 70 that actually counts, not the 65. But then the employer portion also counts. Retirement payments. Been a lot of questions around that one. Presumably this is going to be the employer match plus the employee deferral component. Sorry about the scribbling here. And then state income taxes. Noticeably absent again is the federal taxes. So, this may change, but this is how the law reads now. So in theory, we're going to get a loan for something that we all need to ultimately pay and remit, which is this $30 in employer-employee taxes that somehow we're going to fund. So it's not, it's still a good benefit, but not quite as good as we originally assumed. So, the cap is 100K for the 12-month period preceding the loan. And it's of all these things added up. So you can't just say, all right, let's exclude wages of anybody over $100,000 because, in theory, you might have somebody that's making, 125 that once you reduce off the federal withholdings, add back in the insurance, blah, 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 that's the number that really gets to $100,000 versus just making a blanket $100,000, someone making 50 automatically lop off 50 off your calculation. That's not actually correct because you have to factor out the net taxes. The other thing to consider is around the loan forgiveness. I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail tomorrow, but generally it's going to be based off FTE count and salaries paid. Sorry about the spelling there. So as long as you are back at historic levels, and by historic levels, that means headcount and salary dollars by June 30th, and very specifically with salary dollars, it's that you haven't cut it more than 25% by June 30th, that for below $100,000, then you should be good based on our current reading of it. Again, this could change tomorrow, but our current reading would mean that if $100,000 was your limit, as long as you were paying that equivalent employee $76,000, and meaning all in with on the definition of payroll, plus your head count was where it needed to be, then you should be good for the loan forgiveness. So I think that addresses a lot of questions that we've had around how do I get to what I could qualify for PPP. So with the EIDL loans, that's totally separate. These are straight through the SBA for right now, and they do have the website back online. The application process is a lot easier. If you get one of these loans, you can ultimately roll it into one of these loans, but the max equals 10 million, presumably between the two. These are capped at 2 million, which by default will mean that this gets to 8 million max. You can use this for other purposes that are not PPP, subject to some limited restrictions. And there's been some questions around what if I've already applied for the Economic Injury Disaster Assistance Program. One of the assertions is that I haven't already applied for something. That if you read the law, our take on that is that really means that it's specific to you can't do two PPP programs at the same time, and if you've already received funding under EIDL, then you're supposed to disclose that and not try to double dip and borrow even more money under PPP. So I'm not really concerned about that at this point because I don't think anybody's actually received any EIDL funds at this point. The other part of this is that you get a 10K grant, which is, again, free money. Other questions that we had about PPP really revolve around the application process. On that one, it's just stay tuned. And my expectation is that sometime first week, which is actually, I guess, now, so maybe more realistically would be second week of April, you'll be able to apply with a bank. Right now, all the banks are working on getting their ducks in a row to be able to distribute these funds. So make sure you're at least reaching out and talking to them. But you can't apply for a PPP loan right now. All you can do is start gathering your information. And again, we'll go over this in a little bit more detail tomorrow. But hopefully that answers your questions tonight at a high level, and we'll dive in the weeds tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.